The Jortheri had always been a peaceful species, living in harmony with their homeworld, Avaris. Avaris was a beautiful planet, covered with vast forests, sparkling oceans, and towering mountains that touched the skies. The Jortheri had never been in a hurry to reach the stars like other civilizations. Their society was built on balance with nature, and they had no need for the rush of technological advancement. They were content with their way of life, believing that the universe would continue to favor their calm and steady existence. However, their peaceful world was about to face a challenge that would shake their very foundation. The Jortheri's sun, once a reliable and steady source of warmth, had begun to show signs of instability. The scientists of Avaris first noticed the slight changes. The sun's energy output was fluctuating in dangerous patterns, and solar flares were becoming more frequent. But it was when the sun began to change color, shifting from its familiar golden hue to an ominous red, that the panic truly began. As days passed, the sun grew more erratic, sending out waves of radiation that burned parts of the planet's atmosphere. The once thriving ecosystems began to wither. Plants died, animals fled, and the Jortheri found themselves struggling to adapt to the rapidly changing environment. The Jortheri had never faced anything like this. They had no defense against a dying star. Desperation set in, and the Jortheri Council, a group of the wisest leaders of the species, decided to send out a distress signal, hoping for help from the Galactic Coalition. The Coalition was a powerful group of advanced alien civilizations who had helped many species in the past, providing technological assistance, resources, and protection when needed. It was the Jortheri's only hope. They were certain that the Coalition would answer their call. The distress signal was sent in every possible frequency, from basic radio waves to the most advanced subspace channels. The message was simple but urgent. The sun is dying. Our world is in peril. We need help. Weeks passed. The Jortheri waited, eyes turned to the stars, their hearts full of hope. Surely, the Galactic Coalition would respond. The Coalition had always been quick to respond to crises in the past. The Jortheri were certain they would send ships, technology, or some kind of aid to save them. But as days turned into weeks, the Jortheri began to worry. Finally, the response came. The message was not what they expected. It came not from a Coalition fleet, but from a distant voice, a cold, uncaring tone. The message was clear, and the words stung like ice. The Coalition will not intervene. Your species is not of importance. Your sun's death will not affect the balance of the galaxy. There are more important matters to attend to. Good luck. The message ended abruptly. The Jortheri were stunned. Their eyes widened in disbelief. The Coalition, a group that had claimed to protect the galaxy, had turned their backs on them. The Jortheri had expected help, but they had been abandoned instead. The Council convened immediately to discuss their next move. There was no question now. The Jortheri had no way to survive this on their own. The sun was dying, and with it, their world. They could only watch as their beautiful planet slowly slipped away. As the news spread throughout Avaris, a sense of deep sorrow and helplessness blanketed the planet. The Jortheri had no resources to escape, no ships capable of leaving the planet. The very thought of losing their home, their way of life, was unbearable. The Jortheri were not a violent species. They were not conquerors or adventurers. They had always believed in peace, and now, it seemed that peace would be the very thing that led to their downfall. But as the despair settled in, something else began to stir. It wasn't hope. Not yet. But it was the faintest spark of possibility. If the Galactic Coalition would not help them, perhaps someone else would. Perhaps a species with the courage to act when others would not. Perhaps humans. The humans had always been seen as newcomers in the galactic community, young, unpredictable, and independent. They were a species of warriors, pioneers, and explorers. Though their technology was not as advanced as the Coalition's, they were known for their boldness, their willingness to take risks, and their deep sense of compassion for others. The Jortheri had heard stories of humanity's unexpected kindness. They had heard of the humans' famous, never leave anyone behind attitude. Could it be possible? Could humans come to their rescue? With nothing left to lose, the Jortheri sent one final message, this time directly to human space, hoping against hope that someone would hear it. They poured their hearts into the message, asking for a miracle. Our world is dying. Please, help us. They had no idea if anyone would answer, but they had to try. The distress signal from the Jortheri had echoed through the vast reaches of space, a cry for help lost in the endless silence. In the farthest corner of the galaxy, the humans had been going about their business. They were explorers, researchers, and pioneers, always reaching for the stars. Yet their place in the grand scheme of things had always been somewhat uncertain. The Galactic Coalition, the powerful group of alien civilizations, often viewed humanity as too young, too independent, and too unpredictable to be trusted with important matters. Captain Elena Vance, commander of the human research vessel Hope's Horizon, had never cared much for the Coalition's opinions. She had always believed that humanity's strength lay not in advanced technology or powerful fleets, but in something deeper: compassion. The crew of Hope's Horizon had been exploring a distant nebula when they first picked up the faint Jortheri distress signal. At first, it had seemed like just another piece of static, lost among the billions of signals drifting through space. But Elena, ever the curious one, had felt a pull. She was not one to ignore a cry for help. "Captain," Lieutenant Rachel Sanchez said, leaning over Elena's shoulder at the control console, "I think you should take a look at this." Elena glanced at the screen, where a series of strange patterns flickered across the monitor. It was a distress signal, weak but clear. A voice, ancient and desperate, echoed from the speakers. It was a language Elena didn't recognize at first, but the meaning was undeniable. The words were simple, desperate. "The sun is dying. Our world is in peril. We need help." The message was short, but its impact was immediate. Elena's heart sank as she listened to the words again. She had heard similar messages before, calls from species in need, but this one was different. There was no hope left in the voice of the sender, no expectation of rescue. The voice was a final plea, a last chance before the end. "We have to respond," Elena said firmly, her voice resolute. She turned to her crew. "Prepare the ship. We're going to find out where this is coming from." Despite the skepticism of some of her crew members, Elena knew there was no turning back. The Hope's Horizon wasn't designed for rescue missions. It was a research vessel, meant to study distant phenomena, not to perform heroic rescues. But Elena had always believed that humanity's true strength was in its ability to act when others would turn away. This was a chance to prove it. They traced the signal back to its source, a small blue-green planet orbiting a dying star. The planet was known as Averis, home to a peaceful species called the Jortheri. The crew of Hope's Horizon had heard of them before: peaceful, intelligent, and not particularly known for seeking the help of others. But the message was clear. The Jortheri needed help, and they needed it now. "Captain, the Jortheri aren't part of the Galactic Coalition," Lieutenant Sanchez noted. "We're talking about a species that doesn't have the military power or resources the Coalition usually cares about. Why would they send a message to us?" Elena didn't have all the answers, but she had a gut feeling. "They're out of options, Rachel. If they've turned to us, then they've been abandoned by everyone else." As they approached the planet, the crew saw the full extent of the crisis. Averis, once a lush, vibrant world, was now slowly dying. The sun's instability was causing devastating solar flares, ripping through the atmosphere and turning the once beautiful skies into a fiery mess. The land below was scorched, and the oceans boiled. The Jortheri, a species not known for their aggression, were being forced into a fight for survival. "We need to act fast," Elena said, her voice filled with urgency. "Set course for Averis. Let's see what we can do to help." But as they neared the planet, A familiar voice crackled over the comms. It was an old friend of Elena's, Admiral Harland, an officer in the human military. His voice was grim. "Captain Vance," he said, "I've been briefed on your mission. You're not seriously thinking of intervening, are you?" Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "Of course we are. The Jorthuri need help. We can't just leave them to die." The Admiral's voice hardened. "You're making a mistake. The Galactic Coalition doesn't care about this. The Jorthuri aren't important to the larger picture. Don't waste your time. This is a distraction, Elena. We have our own priorities." But Elena wasn't deterred. "I won't turn my back on them, Harland. The Coalition may have abandoned them, but we don't have to. Humanity doesn't work that way." Without waiting for a response, she cut the comms and turned to her crew. "Prepare for landing. We're going to help these people." As Hope's horizon descended into the atmosphere, the crew was silent, each person feeling the weight of the decision. The Jorthuri had been abandoned by everyone, but humanity was going to do what was right. They weren't just going to watch from the sidelines. They were going to act, to show that compassion and courage could still make a difference in the galaxy. And so, with no promises of success and no guarantees, they began their mission to save a species that no one else cared about. The Hope's horizon landed with a soft thud on the scorched surface of Averis. Elena Vance stood in the doorway of the ship, staring out at the planet that had once been full of life, but was now fading into ruin. The air was thick with the scent of ash, and the sky above them was a fiery red. The sun, once a comforting golden orb, had turned into a burning ball of chaos. It flickered and roared, sending violent waves of radiation that sliced through the planet's atmosphere. The Jorthuri's home was dying. Elena took a deep breath, knowing that they had little time. The Hope's horizon wasn't designed for rescue missions. It wasn't equipped with the heavy lifting equipment or the large cargo bays needed for evacuating an entire planet's population. The ship was a scientific vessel, meant for exploration, not saving species from disaster. But Elena didn't care. She had made a promise to the Jorthuri, and she intended to keep it. "Captain, we have no time to waste," Lieutenant Rachel Sanchez said, her voice urgent as she approached. "The atmosphere is deteriorating faster than we thought. The sun's instability is accelerating. If we don't start evacuating now, we won't be able to get anyone out of here." "I know, Rachel," Elena replied, her eyes scanning the horizon. "We'll do what we can. Let's get the Jorthuri on board and figure out how to evacuate them." The first challenge was finding the Jorthuri. Their capital city, once a bustling metropolis of sleek, crystal-like structures, was now in ruins. The radiation from the sun had torn apart the atmosphere, and violent storms whipped through the city's remains. Elena's team quickly suited up in protective gear before heading out to search for survivors. The Jorthuri were not a warlike species. They didn't have the means to defend themselves against something as powerful as a dying star. They were peaceful, relying on knowledge and cooperation. Yet now, they were scattered, hiding from the storms, afraid and desperate. As Elena's team moved through the ruins, they came across the first group of Jorthuri. They were gathered in a sheltered area, huddled together for protection. Their leader, a dignified Jorthuri named Kireth, looked up at Elena as she approached. "You came," Kireth said, his voice filled with disbelief and wonder. "You came to help us." Elena nodded, her expression firm. "We won't leave you behind. We'll get you to safety. But we need to move quickly. The planet won't last much longer." Kireth's eyes were filled with gratitude, but also with sadness. "We didn't expect anyone to come. The Coalition turned its back on us. We thought we would die here, alone." "You're not alone," Elena said softly. "Humanity won't abandon anyone in need. We'll help you rebuild." The first group of Jorthuri was led to the Hope's horizon, where they were given food, water, and shelter. Elena's crew worked fast, quickly preparing the ship for more refugees, but the process was slow. Each trip to the surface to rescue more Jorthuri took time, and the planet's condition was worsening. The storms were growing fiercer, and the radiation levels were becoming dangerous even with protective suits. "We can't keep this up much longer," Rachel said as she watched another group of Jorthari board the ship. "If we don't get more help soon, we'll be trapped here ourselves." Elena was about to respond when a voice crackled over the ship's comm system. It was from Admiral Harland, the human military officer who had warned her not to intervene. His voice was filled with frustration. "Captain Vance," Harland said, his tone sharp, "you're playing a dangerous game. The Coalition won't tolerate your interference. If you continue, you'll risk getting the entire human fleet involved in this mess." Elena's jaw tightened. "I'm not asking for permission, Admiral. The Jorthari need us. I won't stand by while they die." "Your decision," Harland's voice growled, "but don't expect any support. The Coalition doesn't care about this situation, and if you're not careful, you'll put your entire crew in danger." Elena didn't respond. She knew there was no convincing him. The human military had always been focused on power and control, but that wasn't what she stood for. She believed in compassion, in doing what was right, even if it meant going against the odds. As Hope's Horizon made another trip to the surface, Elena looked at the Jorthari refugees around her. They were scared, but they were also hopeful. They had been abandoned by the galaxy, but humanity had come to save them. And with every trip, Elena felt her belief in humanity's mission growing stronger. "Stay strong," Elena said, looking around at the survivors. "We're not leaving anyone behind. We'll get you to safety." The evacuation was far from perfect, but Elena could see the glimmer of hope in the eyes of the Jorthari. The odds were stacked against them, but humanity's determination was stronger than the fear of failure. Elena and her crew were racing against time, but they would keep pushing forward, no matter what. The evacuation of Averis was well underway, but the planet's condition was worsening every moment. The skies were filled with fiery clouds of radiation, and the ground trembled beneath the feet of those who remained. The Jorthari, once a thriving species full of hope for the future, now lived in the shadow of despair. Their home was slipping away, and they could do nothing to stop it. But there was one thing they hadn't expected: the humans. Kireth, the Jorthari leader, stood at the edge of a crumbling building, gazing up at the ships that were steadily landing to take his people to safety. His heart ached. Just days before, he and his people had believed they were doomed. The Galactic Coalition had turned their backs on them, leaving them to die in the face of an unstoppable disaster. The universe, it seemed, had forgotten the Jorthari. But now, as the human ship Hope's Horizon touched down once more, Kireth felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Hope. It was a fragile thing, something he had almost lost. But it was there, growing stronger with each passing moment. "You came," Kireth whispered to himself. "You really came." He was not the only one watching the human ships. The Jorthari had been hesitant at first. Their history was not one of seeking help from others. They had always prided themselves on their ability to solve problems within their own society. They had never needed to rely on outside forces. But now, as the sun grew fiercer in the sky, they realized that their pride couldn't save them. When the humans had first arrived, there had been a sense of confusion among the Jorthari. These were not beings they were familiar with. Humans were young compared to many of the other galactic species. They were known for their boldness, but also their unpredictability. The Jorthari had never considered humans as a source of salvation. They had always thought of them as newcomers, too fresh, too raw for something as important as this. But now, as they watched the humans work tirelessly, never once faltering in their mission to rescue every last Jorthari, their doubts melted away. Humanity was not like the others. Where the Coalition had seen an insignificant species, the humans saw a people worth saving. The first group of Jorthari that had boarded the Hope's Horizon had been in shock. They could hardly believe they were leaving their home behind. For many of them, Averis had been more than just a planet. It was their heart, their history. They had lived there for centuries, building cities, learning from nature, and finding peace. To leave it all behind, with the knowledge that they would never return, was a painful decision. But the humans, with their calm faces and reassuring smiles, made the process just a little easier. Kireth had been among the first to board the ship, his mind racing with questions. Why had the humans come? What did they want from the Jorthari? Surely they must have some reason for helping, some reward they expected in return. But as he looked into the eyes of Captain Alina Vance, who had greeted him with nothing but warmth and sincerity, he began to understand. There was no hidden agenda. The humans had no expectations. They had simply come to help, because that was who they were. As the hours passed, more and more Jorthari boarded the Hope's horizon. Some were still unsure, their fear making it difficult to trust the humans completely. They had seen too much pain, too much loss. Trust was not something that came easily. But each time they saw a human worker, a crew member, offer them a hand, offer them water, or just a moment of comfort, they began to let down their walls. In the cargo bay, the Jorthari children played together, their laughter ringing out in the air. It was a small thing, but for the adults, it was everything. The sound of their children's laughter was a reminder of the hope that had been reignited. The Jorthari had not lost everything. They still had each other. And now, they had the humans. Kireth stood beside Captain Vance as they looked out over the evacuation. "You are not like the others," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "The Coalition abandoned us. They told us we were not worth saving. They said we were too insignificant. But you saw us. You came when no one else would." Elena smiled, her eyes filled with empathy. "We don't leave anyone behind, Kireth. That's who we are. No one is too insignificant to save." Kireth's eyes shone with unshed tears. "You've given us a chance we never thought we would have. A chance to survive. You've given us hope when we had none." Elena nodded, her voice firm. "It's not over yet. We still have a long way to go, but as long as we can, we'll keep fighting for you. We'll make sure you're safe." The Jorthari looked out at the ships, their hearts swelling with gratitude. They had been abandoned by the galaxy, but humanity had given them a chance. In the face of overwhelming odds, the humans had come. And now, as the last of the Jorthari boarded the ship, they knew they were not alone. They were not forgotten. Not anymore. The Hope's horizon had completed its final sweep of Averis. The last of the Jorthari had been safely evacuated, and the ship now floated in the blackness of space, surrounded by the wreckage of the planet that had once been their home. Averis was dying, its surface scorched, its skies burned, and there was nothing more the humans could do to save it. But they had saved the Jorthari. They had given them a future. Captain Alina Vance stood at the bridge of the Hope's horizon, her gaze fixed on the star system where Averis had once existed. The planet was barely a smudge of light now, consumed by its own dying sun. But in her heart, Alina knew they had done the right thing. They had given the Jorthari a second chance. "We did it," Lieutenant Rachel Sanchez said, her voice filled with relief. "We got them all out." Elena nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Yes, we did. But the hard part isn't over yet. We still need to get them to a safe place, somewhere they can rebuild. The galaxy isn't exactly welcoming to a species that's been abandoned by the Coalition." "I've been thinking about that," Rachel said, glancing at the star map. "There's a colony not far from here, on a planet called Viridia. It's small, but it's peaceful, and they've always welcomed refugees. We could take the Jorthari there." "Viridia," Elena repeated, her voice trailing off as she considered the option. It was a good plan. Viridia had been known for its openness to newcomers, and it was far enough from the Coalition's influence that the Jorthari could rebuild without fear of being hunted down. The idea was solid, but there was something more that nagged at Elena. "Let's do it," Elena finally decided. "We'll make the journey to Viridia. We have a responsibility to these people now, and we won't abandon them." As the ship set course for Viridia, Alina thought back to the conversations she had had with Kirath and the other Jortheri leaders. They had been grateful, of course. They had thanked the humans over and over again for saving them. But there was a deeper sense of sadness that lingered in their eyes. Averis was more than just a planet to them. It was their identity, their home. They had lost everything, and while they had been given a chance at life, it was hard to forget what they had lost. "We're not leaving our people behind," Kirath had told Alina, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We've always been a peaceful people. We will rebuild, and we will rebuild strong. But we will never forget Averis." Alina had understood. She knew that no matter how many times they were saved, some scars could never be healed. The Jortheri would carry the pain of losing their home forever. But at least they would carry it together, with each other, and with humanity's promise to stand by their side. As the Hope's horizon approached Viridia, the crew took a moment to prepare. The Jortheri were still adjusting to their new reality. They had gone from a peaceful, isolated species to refugees in a matter of days. The crew of the Hope's horizon worked to make them feel as comfortable as possible, providing food, water, and medical supplies. Some of the Jortheri had never been off-world before and were overwhelmed by the vastness of space. Alina knew that their journey had only just begun. Viridia would be their new home for now, but the Jortheri had no resources of their own. They would need assistance to establish new settlements, new industries, and new systems of governance. It would take time, but Alina was confident that they would succeed. After all, humanity had shown the galaxy that even the smallest and youngest species could make a big difference. The Hope's horizon entered Viridia's atmosphere, and the crew prepared for landing. Viridia was a beautiful planet, lush, green, and full of life. The Jortheri would find a much-needed peace here, far from the destruction of Averis. The Viridians had already been notified of their arrival, and they had offered to help in any way they could. It was exactly the kind of support the Jortheri needed. When the ship touched down, Alina was the first to step off. She was met by Viridian officials, who welcomed her and her crew with open arms. They had seen the Hope's horizon on its journey through space, and they knew what had happened to the Jortheri. Their faces were kind, and their voices were filled with warmth as they offered their assistance. "Welcome to Viridia," said the lead Viridian ambassador, a tall, calm figure named Keleth. "We are honored to help the Jortheri begin again. This planet is now theirs as much as it is ours." The Jortheri slowly disembarked, their expressions a mix of gratitude and sadness. As they stepped onto the soil of Viridia, they were met with open arms from the Viridians, who immediately began working with them to set up temporary shelters. Kirath stood beside Alina, looking out at the peaceful landscape. "This is a new beginning for us," he said softly, his voice filled with both hope and sorrow. "But it will take time. We will need your help." Alina placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone, Kirath. Humanity will be with you every step of the way." And so, the Jortheri began again. Their future was uncertain, but with humanity by their side, they had hope once more. The galaxy was vast, and their homeworld was gone, but now, for the first time in a long while, they had a chance to rebuild, to create something new, and to live. Months had passed since the Hope's horizon first landed on Viridia. The Jortheri had begun to adjust to their new life, thanks to the help of the Viridians and the continued support of humanity. Their temporary shelters had been replaced with more permanent structures, and the Jortheri were starting to rebuild their society from the ground up. Captain Alina Vance watched as the Jortheri worked side by side with the Viridians. The once distrustful Jortheri had slowly begun to open up to their new neighbors. With the Viridians offering their resources and knowledge, the Jortheri were learning how to adapt to their new world. It was a slow process, but Alina could see the hope growing in their eyes. They were no longer just survivors. They were starting to live again. Alina stood on the balcony of the Hope's horizon, looking out over the growing settlement below. The green hills of Viridia stretched far into the distance, dotted with small buildings, farms, and fields. The sky above was clear, a soft blue that gave the entire planet a peaceful, serene atmosphere. It was a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind on Averis. The colony had become a model for cooperation. The Jortheri shared their advanced knowledge of science and agriculture, while the Viridians provided their expertise in building and sustainability. And humanity. Humanity had offered more than just resources. They had shared their experience in surviving in the unknown, in creating communities where none had existed before. It had been a partnership, one based on respect, trust, and a shared desire to build something new. Elena felt a sense of pride as she watched the progress. She had always believed in the goodness of humanity, in its ability to help others, even when the odds seemed impossible. The Hope's Horizon was still stationed on Viridia, acting as both a hub for humanitarian aid and a symbol of the help humanity had given. The crew had settled into their roles, assisting with the rebuilding process, while also maintaining their ship and preparing for any future missions. One afternoon, as Elena sat in her office, reviewing the latest progress reports, there was a soft knock at the door. She looked up to see Kirath standing in the doorway, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Captain Vance," he began, his voice steady but warm. "I wanted to thank you, again, for everything. For all that you've done for us. It means more than words can express." Elena smiled and gestured for him to sit. "You don't have to thank me, Kirath. We're here because it's the right thing to do. You don't have to carry this burden alone anymore." Kirath nodded, though his expression was serious. "I know, but what you've done for us, what humanity has done for us, is something we will never forget. When we first arrived here, I didn't know if we would survive. We had lost everything. Our home, our families, our future. But now, I see hope again. And I see a future for my people. You've given us a chance we never thought we would have." Elena leaned back in her chair, her hands clasped in front of her. "You've given yourselves that chance, Kirath. Humanity didn't come here to save you from your fate. We came because we saw your strength. You've fought for your survival. And now we're just helping you build something new." Kirath's eyes softened. "Still, you gave us hope when no one else would. Your people didn't look at us like a lost cause. You saw us as equals, as people who deserve to live." Elena's heart swelled with emotion. "I believe every life is worth saving. We're all in this together, whether we like it or not." As the days went by, Elena could see how the Jortheri were starting to thrive. Their new homes were being completed, and their crops were beginning to grow. The Viridians had taught them new techniques for farming, while the humans provided technology that made the process easier. The Jortheri were beginning to establish their own government, with Kirath taking on a leadership role, but always working closely with both the Viridians and the humans. There were still challenges ahead. The Jortheri had to rebuild their education systems, their infrastructure, and their way of life. But the most important thing was that they were no longer alone. They had allies, humanity, and the Viridians, and they had the strength of their own people. Together, they would make it through. One evening, as Elena stood outside, watching the sun set over Viridia's hills, Kirath approached once again. This time, he was not alone. He was accompanied by several other Jortheri leaders, their faces filled with determination. "Captain," Kirath said, "we have decided to build a memorial for Averis. It will be a place where we can remember our home, but also a symbol of how far we've come. We want to honor those we lost, and those who helped us survive." Elena nodded, her heart heavy with emotion. "That's a beautiful idea, Kirath. A place where your people can find peace, but also remember that no matter what happens, you're never truly alone." And so, the Jortheri began to create their memorial. It was a beautiful garden, filled with flowers that had been brought from Averis, a reminder of the planet they had lost. It was not a place of mourning, but one of hope, a place where the Jortheri could look to the future while honoring the past. As the memorial was completed, The Jortheri stood together, their heads held high. They had risen from the ashes of their lost world, and with the help of their new allies, they had created something beautiful. They had a future once again, and this time, they knew they would not face it alone. A year had passed since the Jortheri arrived on Viridia, and the changes were nothing short of remarkable. The planet, once a symbol of their loss, had become a home once again. A home not just for the Jortheri, but for everyone who had stood by their side in their darkest hour. Humanity, the Viridians, and the Jortheri had forged a bond that no disaster could break. The memorial to Averis, standing at the heart of the new settlement, was a symbol of the strength of the Jortheri people. The garden was flourishing, its flowers vibrant and full of life. It was a place where the Jortheri could come to remember their lost home, but also a place where they could find peace in knowing that they had survived. The loss of Averis would never be forgotten, but it was no longer the only thing that defined the Jortheri. Captain Alina Vance stood at the edge of the memorial, watching as Jortheri children played nearby. Their laughter filled the air, a sound that was still rare on a planet so new to them. It was a sound that Alina had come to cherish, a reminder of the resilience of the Jortheri people and their ability to move forward, even in the face of unimaginable loss. Beside her, Kirath stood silently, his gaze fixed on the garden. The leader of the Jortheri had grown into a wise and respected figure, not only among his people, but also among the humans and Viridians who had helped him. His journey had not been easy, but the strength and wisdom he had gained over the past year were evident in his calm demeanor. "How is it, Kirath?" Alina asked, her voice soft. "How does it feel to see your people beginning again?" Kirath turned to her, a small but genuine smile on his face. "It feels like a new beginning. We are no longer defined by the destruction of Averis. We are rebuilding, but more importantly, we are living again. And for that, I am forever grateful." Alina nodded, her heart swelling with pride. The Jortheri had done more than survive. They had thrived. The Viridians and humans had been there every step of the way, but it was the Jortheri's own strength, their unity, and their determination that had carried them through. The settlement had expanded beyond what anyone had expected. Fields of crops now stretched across the landscape, feeding not just the Jortheri, but also the Viridians and humans who had joined the effort. The Jortheri had learned to adapt to Viridia's climate, and in doing so, they had discovered new ways to grow food, build shelter, and harness the planet's natural resources. They were not only rebuilding, they were contributing to the larger community. A new government had been established, with Jortheri leaders working alongside Viridians and humans to ensure that the needs of all were met. It was a system based on cooperation, a model that valued every voice, every perspective. The wounds of the past were still there, but they had begun to heal, replaced by a sense of shared purpose. One evening, as the sun set over the peaceful landscape, Kirath invited Alina to a gathering in the heart of the settlement. It was a celebration of their success, a moment to honor their progress and the bonds they had built. Jortheri, Viridians, and humans stood together in the gathering area, their faces alight with joy. It was a rare sight, a true moment of unity. As Alina walked through the crowd, she could see the joy in the faces of the Jortheri. They were no longer strangers on an unfamiliar world. They were part of something larger, something beautiful. She could see families, friends, and even strangers exchanging stories and laughter. The Jortheri were no longer divided by their fear and their loss. They were connected by something stronger now: hope, resilience, and the shared belief that they could build a future together. Kirath stepped onto a raised platform, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Today, we celebrate not only our survival, but our rebirth. We have built something here, together. With the help of our new friends, we have found a home once again. But this is not the end of our journey. It is only the beginning." The crowd cheered, their voices ringing out in unison. For the first time in a long while, there was no sadness in their hearts. They had come together to create something new, something worth celebrating. Kirath turned to Alina, who stood nearby, and gestured for her to join him. "Captain Alina Vance," he said, his voice filled with deep respect. "Without your help, none of this would have been possible. You and your people have shown us what true friendship and cooperation mean. You have given us a future. For that, we will be forever grateful." Alina felt a lump rise in her throat as she stepped forward. She hadn't expected this. She had come to help, to give the Jorthari a chance at survival. But she had found something more, a partnership, a connection that transcended the boundaries of species. Humanity had given the Jorthari hope, but it was the Jorthari who had shown humanity the true meaning of resilience. "It is I who should thank you, Kireth," Alina said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "You have taught us all what it means to never give up, to never stop fighting for what matters." As the crowd erupted into applause, Alina knew that this moment, this celebration, was not just a victory for the Jorthari. It was a victory for all of them. Humanity, the Viridians, and the Jorthari had come together to create something stronger than any one species could build alone. They had created a future, one where no one was left behind, where no one was forgotten. And that, Alina thought, was a future worth fighting for.